Привет, I'm Chuck Olinik. I'm a Ukrainian-American baptized with the name Yaroslav, which became my name in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. I grew up in a Ukrainian household, so I became very interested in all things Slavic. And since I got out of the classroom, I used to teach world history, I decided to start putting together videos and sharing some of the research that I've done over the years. So I've been retelling stories, whether they're the mythology or the skazka, the folk stories, or the middle into the epic, heroic stories. And I thought I would share one today, and it's a real old one. And you can find it in a bunch of different cultures. It's The Smith and the Devil. So let's get started. Once there was an old smith who, going into church one day, stood in front of a picture of the Last Judgment. There was a chort, a devil, painted there, so terrible, so black all over, with horns and tail. What a fine devil, he thought. I want one for my smithy. So he sent for a painter and told him to paint on the doors of the smithy a devil who should be exactly like the one he'd seen in church. And it was done. From the time the devil was painted on the doors, the old man, whenever he went into the smithy, always greeted the devil in a jovial manner, in a friendly manner, and would then light the fire in the forge and set to work. So he went on living for some 10 years on most excellent terms with the devil. Then he fell ill and died. His son succeeded him and took over the smithy, but he had no such intention of following his father's practice. Whether he went early to the smithy or not, nothing prospered, and instead of greeting the devil kindly, he went and took his very biggest hammer and knocked the devil 3 times on the forehead and then set to work. When a holy feast day came by, he went into church and lit a taper in front of the saints. But as he approached the devil, he spat upon him. For 3 whole years this went on, and every day he greeted the unclean spirit with a hammer and spat upon him. The devil had been very patient and endured all this mistreatment until at last it became beyond bearing, and he would stand for it no longer. Enough! I'm going to put an end to this contemptuous treatment. So the devil turned himself into a fine young lad and came into the smithy. Will you take me into the smithy as an apprentice? I will heat the coals, I will blow the bellows. The smith was very pleased. I certainly will, he said. 2 heads are better than one. So the devil turned apprentice, and he lived for a month with him and soon got to know all the smith's work, better than the master himself. And whatever the master could not do, this new apprentice was able to. One day, the master did not come into the smithy and left his underling to do the work, and it was all done. Once, when the master was not at home, there was only the apprentice to work in the smithy, and the apprentice saw an old woman. She was the wife of the local landowner passing by in a wagon. He bobbed out his head and cried, "Hail there! There's new work to be done. Old folks turned into new." Out flew the old woman from her wagon and into the smithy. "What did you say? Is this really true? Do you mean it?" "Are you mad?" she asked the boy. "Old woman, do not lecture me," the evil spirit answered. "If I didn't know how to do this, I would not have summoned you." "What would it cost me?" asked the landowner's wife. "It will cost you 500 hryvnia. I will pay you if you can turn me into a young woman." "Let us begin." The apprentice, who was the evil spirit, took the money and sent the coachman into the village. Bring 2 buckets of milk. And he seized the lady by the legs and threw her into the forge and burned her all up. Nothing but her bones were left. When the 2 tubs of milk came, he emptied them into a pail, collected all the bones, and threw them into the milk, and lo and behold, in moments, there was the old woman, but no longer old. She was young and beautiful. She went home delighted, and went up to her husband, and he fixed his eyes upon her, but didn't know his wife. "What's the matter? Have you lost your eyesight?" the old woman asked. "It's me. Can you not see it as me? I am young now and beautiful. I don't want an old husband. Go at once to the smith and ask him to forge you young. You won't know yourself." What could the husband do? He bowed to the inevitable, and so off he drove. By this time, the smith had returned, but the apprentice was not there. And the smith looked around and asked neighbors, and they had not seen him. Now, the rich landowner arrived at the smithy. "Make a young man of me." The smith was puzzled by this. "What are you talking about?" "Do it. You did this for my wife. Now do it for me." "Do you have all your senses?" asked the smith. Well, the landowner became much more angry, and the smith said, "Tell me what happened." And the landowner explained what his wife had explained, of how the apprentice had thrown his wife into the forge and pulled out the bones and poured milk over the bones, and his wife was suddenly young. And the smith thought about it. Said, "Let me try." And so he seized the rich landowner by the legs and threw him into the forge and fished out the bones and ashes of the landowner and poured the milk over his bones, but there wasn't a young landowner. There were just little pieces of bone floating in the milk. By this time, the old woman, now young woman, had sent messengers to the smithy in search of her husband. And the smith explained what happened. Oops. Her husband was dead. The messengers, the servants, were now hauling him off to the gallows. Then the same young man who had worked as the apprentice to the smith appeared and asked, "Where are they taking you, master?" "They're going to hang me," cried the smith, and he explained what happened. "Well, never mind, uncle," said the unholy spirit. "Swear to me that you will never ever strike me with your hammer, and I will secure you such honor as your father had. The lady's husband shall arise young and in full health, but never ever strike me again." And the smith suddenly realized who he was speaking to. The smith swore, and he made oath that he would never again raise the hammer on the devil, and would give the devil every honor, to give him his due. Then the workman ran to the smithy, and soon returned with the husband, crying out to the servants to stop. "Do not hang the smith," for there the master was, as a young man. He untied the ropes and set the smith free. And the smith nevermore spat upon the devil, nor struck the devil with his hammer. But the apprentice, who was the unholy spirit, vanished and was never seen again, at least not in that form. The master and the mistress, the landowner and his wife, they lived on and experienced good in their life. It was at the feast I heard this tale. There it was, I drank mead ale. Though it flowed down my beard, my mouth stayed dry, for never a drop passed my lips, swear I.